Hello everyone, it's Gigabeef here, and today we're figuring out the best stims because things are a bit different in 13.5, especially when it comes to painkillers. Other buffs such as damage reduction are also gone across all of the stims, and there are 5 broad categories which most fall into, which are painkillers, stamina increasing, bleed removal, health regen, and carry capacity, but of course different stims can have a combination of these different categories. There are a few miscellaneous ones too, which we'll cover at the end for specific situations, but first let's jump right into painkillers. Before we continue, today's video is sponsored by the Ridge wallet, and they've kindly sent me 2 more new styles to check out. Firstly, the sea glass version of the Ridge wallet, which is one of my new favorites, as well as the lavender one as well. Now both of these wallets are in the new design with the cash strap, and what they've got is the cash strap matching the actual color of the wallet itself, which I think is really awesome. And they've got a new Ridge logo here as well. And on the inside, they've actually got a polished metal interior rather than the standard black of the normal Ridge wallets, as you can see here. So it's slightly different, a little bit of a lighter design with a pastel color instead, which is very cool. As usual, they hold up to 12 cards really securely, and as I've shown, they come in a ton of cool designs. This is mine that I've been using for well over a year now, and it's basically good as new. I opt for the money clip rather than the cash strap, but it's completely down to personal preference as to which one you want to use. As usual, all styles of the Ridge wallet block unsolicited RFID reading as well, so you're not going to have somebody pilfering the details of your red labs card when you're not looking. The Ridge build quality is excellent on these. The wallets are so light but much more robust than a traditional one, and are literally the size of a card, so it will fit into your pocket really nicely. There are well over 30 colours and styles in the range, so you can pick the one that fits with your own vibe. The key case securely holds 1 to 6 keys, and I streamlined mine down to just 2, which is a huge improvement on my old bulky keyring, stopping them jingling about and poking holes in my pockets all of the time. The Ridge team are so confident that you'll be converted that they have a 99-day test drive period, after which you can get your money back if you don't love it, and a lifetime warranty if you do. What's more, you can get the best offer right now at ridge.com/gigaridge to save 10% on your order. So that's ridge.com/gigaridge to join the 80,000 strong 5-star rated proud owners of the Ridge wallet. So in patch 13.5, the painkiller effect was changed quite markedly. What used to be a sharpness increase is now a desaturation effect, i.e. all of the color comes out of the screen and there's a blur added around the edge of the monitor. This can cause problems with your peripheral vision and make spotting people quite tricky, so you have to decide whether you want to lose some vision and spotting potential but be on painkillers all of the time, or not be able to move if you get hit in the leg but be able to see everyone on your screen. The decision is not that straightforward because there are downsides for both cases, so let's go through all of the painkillers in terms of action time from high to low, and then we can figure out a course of action that I've been using recently which seems to work relatively well. At the top of the list we have morphine with the longest action time across the stims with 305 seconds. Most painkiller stims lose energy and hydration on your PMC when you use them, and morphine is no different, losing 10 energy and 15 hydration. But what does matter is whether your debuff is a fixed amount, like in the case of morphine, or whether it's a debuff over time because of your level in metabolism, but we'll cover that at the end of the video. In number 2, with 245 seconds action time, we have propofol, which gives you a tremor as the side effect, and we have trimadol at 185 seconds with minus 90 energy and minus 90 hydration over the full course of it being active. The last 2 stims are the short acting ones, the L1 being 120 seconds with minus 27 energy and minus 27 hydration, and adrenaline with 65 seconds with minus 24 energy and minus 30 hydration over the full action time of the stim. Historically within this grouping, players have almost always chosen propofol, partly because of its plus 1 HP per tick as well, in addition to its painkiller effect, but also because the tremor is the only downside for it. It's actually one of the few stims that doesn't give you energy or hydration debuffs. However, the issue with propofol is that because it's a quick stim to use, it's normally on people's hotbar and you use it when you get into a decent firefight. This can mean that after the firefight is over, you've still got the propofol painkiller effect active, which can actually be counterproductive if you're out in the middle of nowhere and it wasn't your intention to keep it on for such a long amount of time. On this basis, the adrenaline can be really useful. With only 65 seconds of uptime, after the fight is over, the painkiller effect disappears, and it also gives you a quick 60 HP as well in 15 seconds, which is a nice little boost. Even though we're talking about stims here, it would be remiss not to talk about the other types of meds that give you painkiller effects too, being the Golden Star, the Vaseline, the ibuprofen, the Augmentin, and the Analgin painkiller. Golden Star has the longest active time, and so what I've taken to doing is keeping an adrenaline on my hotbar for when I get into trouble, and a Golden Star in my secure container for using deliberately when I'm going into dodgy areas where I don't need the peripheral vision as much. If I'm playing on woods, for example, and just walking around, I typically don't want to be painkillered up there because I need my peripheral vision more than other places. Whereas running to extract on either shoreline or interchange, popping a Golden Star is often quite a good idea because your killers can only be in so many locations, and it's much better to not get caught with your leg broken in the middle of an open field. If you still want to use propofol, then that is fine, but I think there is a place for mixing and matching the shorter stims versus the longer ones. The question of why Propofol and adrenaline in the first place over some of the other three is relatively simple. Morphine, although it has the longest acting time, as we've thought about already, is not actually necessarily a bonus. It also doesn't give you any kind of health regen, and so Propofol is pretty much strictly better. Tramadol, on the other hand, is actually a relatively good stim because it pairs with a +3 stamina recovery rate that we'll talk about a little bit later, so this can help you get out of sticky situations. But it is unfortunately a lot more expensive than even Propofol, and so that kind of puts us off wanting to put it on our hotbar, losing it every time we die. It also doesn't have any health regen to speak of, which gives Propofol and adrenaline a little bit of an advantage in combat. L1 is in a weird place. It's not as short a time as adrenaline, so if you do want the painkiller effect to go away as soon as possible, then adrenaline is better. If you do want the painkiller for longer, well then Propofol is better, and it doesn't have any heal to speak of either. So the next category on stamina regen brings us straight back to Tramadol, which is in fact the best stamina regen stim that you can have with +3 per second, which really greatly reduces the amount of decrease that you get when you sprint. If you combine this with one of the others, often you can get an infinite sprint bar, which is pretty insane. The only downsides really to Tramadol, as we said before, are the slightly shorter active time of 180 seconds and also the energy and hydration debuffs, which are quite extreme until you get your levels up in metabolism. In second place is the SJ6, which is usually the player base's preferred stim for regenerating stamina with +2 per second and a 240 second active time. This typically is enough to get you where you want to go, and the only downside on it is a tremor when you get there, so you don't have to deal with energy and hydration debuffs like you do with Tramadol when you get to your target location. The SJ6 is a bit cheaper than Tramadol as well normally because you can either craft it or do the barter at Therapist level 4, which if you buy your salines at the right price can be incredibly effective. In third place we have the 3BTG stim, which with +1 stamina per second over 240 seconds isn't as powerful as the SJ6, but it has some extra stats that make it a little bit of a hybrid stim. This one has both attention and perception with +30 levels, and perception in particular can be quite important if you're going without a headset, i.e. if you're wearing a big helmet or something like the Tequila face shield. This is because perception allows you to hear slightly further, and so it should offset somewhat the disadvantage of not having an active headset on. It does cause some energy drain at -30, and it also gives you a tremor just like SJ6, so it's kind of an all-rounder stim, but for me it's a little bit niche to use most of the time. The final one that we have is Meldonin, which is actually the weakest stamina regen of all with +0.5 per second, but it's over 900 seconds. Some people have questioned the benefit of Meldonin now that the damage reduction has been removed from it, but I think the 0.5 per second actually makes more difference than you might expect. When you're so used to playing your character without these stamina buffs, you get an idea of how far you can go and how long you can hold your weapons up for and that kind of thing, but with Meldonin you could just go that little bit further and your stamina regens that little bit quicker. It just feels really nice. Do remember that these stamina buffs over time also affect arm stamina as well, so if you're doing a lot of long range sniping and you're doing a lot of scanning around with potentially a heavy weapon for something like Shooter Born in Heaven, then this little 0.5 per second does actually help you with that too. For this category overall, you can't really go wrong with an SJ6. It does what you think it should do and it doesn't last too long, and it's also quite cheap as well. I do use Meldonin sometimes for that little boost because it just makes games feel that much nicer, but it is more niche and I tend to find myself not really using Tramadol all that much. Category 3, which is another important stim class, is bleed removal. There are 3 stims in here: the Zagustin, the AHF1 and the Perforteran, or the Blue Blood as it's also called. Zagustin is the one that is typically used by the player base simply because it's been in the game for the longest, and so people are used to using it. It gives you a tremor after it's finished and also -56 hydration, which is quite a bit. Of the 3, it has the longest active time of 180 seconds, so that's 3 minutes where you can't get any bleeds at all, which is quite good and compares to something like the AHF1, which is only 60 seconds. Some people value this more than me, but I find that I use it on a very reactionary basis. I tend to never pop a Zagustin or an AHF1 before going into battle, and I usually only use it if I have, say, 2 heavy bleeds and a light bleed and I'm just not going to be able to heal them all in time. All 3 of these stims stop a bleed that is already active on your player, so they're very similar in that respect. AHF1 does have less downsides than the Zagustin though, with only -36 hydration, and it doesn't have a tremor, which is kind of interesting. Blue Blood, on the other hand, has got much worse debuffs because it reduces your energy by 66, which you could argue that energy is worse to remove than hydration, simply because when you get energy to 0, it's much more punitive than when you get hydration to 0. However, the one upside to Blue Blood is that it has a +1.5 health per second regen on it, a little bit like Propofol, and so as well as removing bleeds, it'll also heal you about 90 across 1 minute, which is pretty cool. Typically on the flea market, Zagustin and AHF1 are both quite cheap, and Perforteran tends to be about twice the price, so normally I just use one of Zagustin or AHF1, depending on which one is cheaper at the time. So as well as being a bleed remover, Perforteran leads us into this next category of health regen, along with the ETG, the Propofol, the PNB and the adrenaline again. If you want to recover your health fast in a fight, the ETG is the only real choice, with 6.5 HP per second, which over a minute gives you 390 HP, so it nearly refills your PMC's health completely from 0. It also does something slightly strange to your energy, giving you 30 back and then taking 60 away later. In number 2 is the Propofol in terms of the amount of HP given to your PMC. Although it's only 1 per second, because it acts for 300 seconds, it gives you back 300 HP over that time. Although the painkiller effect running for 300 seconds is a bit of a mixed bag now, like we said before, that alongside the +1 HP regen makes it an extremely useful stim even now. When you're totally beaten up after a fight and slowly fixing black limbs one by one, Propofol is very useful to avoid you having to heal the rest of your entire body whilst you're doing it, which is really cool. The bottom 3 on this are quite a big step down in terms of overall HP. The next one is PNB, which gives 3 per second for a total of 120 and also gives you a tremor after you've finished using it. This used to be one of the ones that had a damage reduction on it, but now it's strictly a health regen stim, as well as a little bit of strength. The unfortunate thing about this is I think you'd probably just rather use adrenaline because of the combined painkiller effect with it. Blue blood we've also seen with its 1.5 per second, which is great for stopping bleeds, but you shouldn't really use it just for health regen, and adrenaline is my preferred in this category for just general everyday hotbar usage with its 4 HP per second, giving you 60. This isn't a lot of total HP to recover in a combat situation, but what it does do is it stops limbs going blacked if you've got loads of bleeds and you don't quite have time to fix them yet. For this category, I actually carry adrenaline, Propofol, and an ETG. The adrenaline sits on my hotbar so that I can access it quickly, the Propofol is there in case of long-term healing, and the ETG is when things go really bad and I need to heal desperately right now behind cover. One final thing to mention is about costs. The ETG is extremely expensive and usually sits in my secure container until I really need it, costing over about 100,000 rubles on the flea market at least. You can also barter it with Therapist 3 for 4 shaman shampoos, and those shampoos can be crafted in the hideout, and they're usually quite a profitable craft anyway, and so it's not a bad one to run alongside your Kadura. Propotols and adrenalines tend to be a little bit cheaper, adrenaline usually sitting between 19 and 20,000 rubles, and Propofol has slowly ticked up this wipe, and I actually saw it at 30,000 rubles the other day. This thing can be crafted in the med station. Because this craft uses ibuprofen and golden star, you can go and use those painkillers down to 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 15 and then put them through the med station to do the craft if you want to be super efficient. Category number 4 of our main important stats is the weight carry capacity. There are only 2 really in here, which is the Mule and the Obdorbos 2, which are both good, but they both have different use cases. What both of these stims do is they change the weight capacity on your PMC, so they shift the level at which you go from underweight to overweight and overweight to that sort of mega overweight level where you can't really move. For 900 seconds, the Mule gives you plus 50% to these thresholds, and for 1800 seconds, the Obdorbos 2 gives you plus 45%, so at face value they look very similar other than the time. However, although the Mule stim does decrease your HP, it is only by 0.1 per second, so it's not really a lot. Over 900 seconds, this is only 90 health. Compared to the Obdorbos 2, this is minus 1 per second, which over 1800 seconds is, yes, minus 1800 HP, so you really do need to manage your health a lot more with the Obdorbos 2, typically by popping a Propofol at the same time, which fortunately has plus 1 per second. The other downside to the Obdorbos 2 is the minus 1 stamina per second as well, so you will actually find it slightly harder to get out. If you want to match a Mule with the Obdorbos 2, you have to basically pop a Propofol and also an SJ6 or something so that you get to the same level as the Mule. On that basis, you can probably see why the Obdorbos 2 is a lot cheaper. It's typically about 45,000 rubles on the fleet as opposed to the Mule, which is more like a 120 or 130k. So there's a big difference there, but there's kind of an assumption that you're going to be having to use some of the stims some of the time when you do the Obdorbos 2 thing instead. In short, Mule is great when you've got a really long way to go. Obdorbos 2 is when you just need a little bit extra to boost yourself to that extract that's only around the corner. So with the important categories done, there's a whole bunch of other random miscellaneous and niche use cases, one of which is food recovery. Now the SJ12 is the king for this because over its time usage, it gives you plus 30 energy and plus 30 hydration. We've investigated this in the past, and because the PMC's energy and hydration debuff happen in one big chunk every few seconds, whereas the SJ12 is continuous, this actually prevents you from sitting at the 0 bound for both energy and hydration, which stops you taking damage most of the time. This is even the case if you have a lower level of health and metabolism, so that your overall energy or hydration is negative. For a quick boost in food recovery, as we said before, the ETG gives you 30 and then takes away 60 afterwards, but this is interesting because of the way that it ends up working with higher levels of metabolism. Every level that you go up in metabolism decreases the active time of negative debuffs on the stims, but it leaves the positive ones the same. So at the beginning, if you use an ETG, it'll add 30 energy and then take 60 away. But if you get to elite metabolism at level 51, it'll add 30 energy and then only take 30 away afterwards. This can have a big impact on some of the stims that take away high levels of energy and hydration, for example Trimadol with minus 90 of both, but if you've got high levels of metabolism, this can be down to 45 instead, which is a lot more manageable. Do bear in mind though that fixed debuffs such as the morphine won't get affected by metabolism because they're an actual number and it's not a debuff over time. One that can save you sometimes is the Golden Star. This can give you minus 19 energy, but then it gives you 5 energy and 5 hydration back over the next 5 seconds. This is useful because you can't have 0 energy, so what you do is you pop a Golden Star when you're at 2 or 3 energy or so, you take the minus 19 hit which puts you at 0, but then you get 5 back over the next 5 seconds, and this gives you a couple of minutes outside of the 0 boundary which you wouldn't have had before. As a totally random wildcard, augmenting gives you 5 energy for no apparent reason. If you're going to be fighting cultists, then Antidote can be useful. XTG12 is the obvious one, but Perforteran also these days gives you an antidote effect. This has been taken away from augmenting, which doesn't work anymore, so bear that in mind. There are a couple of stims that give you perception. We spoke a little bit before about the 3 BTG, but also the SJ12, as well as giving you food, also gives you plus 30 perception, which is good for hearing. This is also the longest one that you can have at 600 seconds, which is pretty neat. As a slightly weaker effect, the Obdorbos 2 gives you plus 20 for 1800 seconds, but this really isn't its primary purpose, so I wouldn't use this for perception. Just stick with the SJ12 or maybe the 3 BTG. One that's never really used is the original Obdorbos stim. This gives you a 25% chance to get all sorts of different buffs, but on the flip side, there's a 25% chance to get some really nasty things as well. The worst of these are increases damage taken by 20% or tremor for the entirety of its duration, but at the moment it also has a 25% chance just to straight up kill you, which BSG do keep adding from time to time and removing it depending on what's going on in the game at the moment. Then finally we have 3 stims that don't really seem to do anything these days. The SJ9 is one that's very sought after for quests, but in terms of actually using it, the only thing that it does is lower your body temperature for 300 seconds. The idea behind this is to hide yourself from thermal scopes, but it's got such a very limited use and the time is a bit short. I would expect this to be a lot longer if I was going to use it in a raid where I was expecting to get thermals. The only thing I can see this being useful for these days is causing a tremor for 420 seconds, which is kind of handy for completing that quest from Jaeger where you have to get headshots with it. The SJ1 is another one that's barely used. It's only got endurance and strength on it, so it can increase your weight limit a little bit when using it, but it's only 180 seconds too, so I just don't really see anybody using this ever. Finally, P22 really is probably the most useless stim in the entire game now, giving you stress resistance, health and vitality, none of which are all that useful in raid particularly, because this used to be one of the old damage reduction stims which has been removed, so this one just needs a rework. Now, as well as metabolism, there is another skill that is useful to think about with stims, which is immunity. Metabolism is the most important one because it reduces the time of negative debuffs, but what immunity does is it reduces the actual effect of those debuffs. The issue is, as opposed to metabolism, which is probably the easiest skill to level in the game, immunity is one of the hardest. The way to get XP in immunity is to have a stat-based debuff on your PMC, and when it goes away, you get immunity XP proportional to how long the debuff was on. The 2 classic tools for getting immunity XP are Pevco Beer and a max energy, because both of these give you small irrelevant stat debuffs, and when that goes away you get some XP. It also works on stims like Meldonin so long as you don't die before the effect disappears, and it also works for energy and hydration timed debuffs these days, which is a change that wasn't present about 3 patches ago. Even after chugging a max energy pretty much every raid so far, my immunity is only 5, so it does take some extreme grinding to get up to the higher levels. However, you can see the effect of this already, so with adrenaline you get a minus 10 stress resistance, but on my character it's only 9.5. And remember that the time of this is actually halved as well because of my very high metabolism. Both of these skills are very useful if you get them to max level. Metabolism stops you taking any damage from hydration and energy when you reach 0, and immunity gives you a 55% chance to completely ignore the negative effects from stims. This is the main reason that the guys that play a lot try to get immunity early, because there's quite a lot of events in Tarkov's history where there's a stim that's come through with a really terrible debuff on it, such as plus 1000 damage, and 55% of the time you could just simply ignore it. This makes events like this much easier to complete, but as we said, it's probably not accessible to the regular player. So what do I keep in my secure container? Well, I have at least one of each major category, so health with the ETG, adrenaline and the propitol, adrenaline and propitol again for the painkillers, so these double up, SJ6 for stamina, mule for carry capacity, and Zagustin for fixing bleeds. I also keep the SJ12 around in case I go down to 0 hydration or energy because it's extremely useful, and I also keep a golden star in my secure container as well for those long-term painkiller moments, which I tend to pair with the adrenaline depending on the situation. This seems to cover everything that I need, but I would definitely suggest getting an injector case as soon as you are able to for those clutch moments where you need either an SJ12 or a Mule or an ETG. Last patch, players waited until they completed Chemical Part 4 to get the injector case from Therapist, but this wipe it doesn't make sense. Because of the restricted ammo cases, you're actually better off getting that from Prapor instead and just buying an injector case as soon as you can from the fleet. I've already had at least 5 or 6 raids where I definitely would have died without the injector case, so it's definitely paid for itself back over time. So a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.